Thank you, Balwinder. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And so I am going to be talking today about labels, stereotypes, and creating stories. Let me get started, actually. So from the day we were born, labels are placed upon us. So I was born in a Washington, D.C. hospital, and one of the first things that get placed upon you, at least in the United States, is a race label. So if you look at your birth certificate, there's actually a race column. And interestingly, in my case, most people cannot get what my race actually says. Anybody wants to take a guess what my race column says on my birth certificate?
Asian?
Asian, that's a good guess.
South Asian?
South Asian, another good guess. Incorrect guesses. Anybody else? Think a bigger demographic group. Very big.
Chinese?
No. So let me answer that question for you, and I'll show you my birth certificate for that, actually. Bottom left corner. I'm white. And I know you probably are thinking, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. So let me put it this way. The label white itself doesn't make sense. There are no white people. Technically, there are no white people. If you look at a white piece of paper, I don't think you know any other human being on this planet who looks white. Neither are there people who look black. But there's a long history behind why we have terms like black and white. A long history of demeaning people, defining them, confining them, justifying slavery. But that's not where I'm going to go today. But I just want you to sort of, for a moment, realize I had this label placed upon me because technically, in the pseudoscience of racism, all South Asians are considered Caucasian. And we, as Americans, confuse Caucasians for white people. Not all Caucasians are white people. So technically, just remember this, for all of you who hail from South Asia, you're white people. This is me in elementary school, and so I spent the first 4 years of my life in Washington, D.C., Maryland area, moved with my parents to India, who were from India. And among many other labels, one of the things that happens is you follow your parents' lifestyle. So whatever their faith or belief system is, you don't get to choose it. You get to kind of follow it, at least in the first few years. I did that. So you see that bun on top of my head. My faith at the time happened to be a Sikh faith, a young religion from India. And as part of that faith, we don't cut our hair. Both men and women, we keep long hair. Boys keep their hair in a bun, including men. But as young boys, we wear these little small turbans called patkas. The reason I'm showing these photographs to you is for another reason, though. You've noticed I started wearing glasses really early on. Now, glasses are considered pretty cool these days. You have a lot of different brand names. Everybody's sporting new glasses all the time. Well, when I was a young boy, putting glasses on was not a cool thing. It unfortunately made me very open to targeting by bullies. And not only bullies actually out on the streets or in school, it was actually loved ones at home, parents, uncles, aunts, cousins, who just thought, you know what, you don't look good, man. Somehow, physically, there's something not acceptable about your appearance. And so what happened is after a few months and years, people started using the word ugly to refer to me in comparison to my brother, who happened to be handsome. I knew that, my brother knew that, but we didn't have to say that to each other. But unfortunately, society has to project its insecurities, their own fears and anxieties. So that's how a lot of my loved ones kept telling me as I was growing up, something's wrong with you, Vishavjit. You don't look good. You're an ugly kid. So by the time I was a high schooler, I got convinced. I bought into that label. So my struggle was, okay, how do I overcompensate now? So how do I prove my worth? So the way I chose to prove my worth was, well, let me see if I can study really hard and go to one of the best universities on the planet, and that's how I'm going to prove my worth. So that was, as a young boy, I have these labels placed upon me, and now those labels are driving my life-changing decisions. What do I need to do? Where do I need to go to school? So that became my vulnerability, and that's something we all carry. So this was a man-made, humankind-made vulnerability that I had to carry with me. And then something drastic happens by the time I go to University of California, Santa Barbara. This is sophomore year. But before I actually give you a little backstory on this, I want to sort of talk very briefly about another impact labels can have. So I mentioned I happen to be Sikh. That's one of the labels people put on me. I happen to be of Sikh faith. As a young boy in the year 1984, I happened to be in New Delhi when the Indian Prime Minister was killed. And for a few days in the first week of November, anybody who had that label on them, Sikhs, mostly men, turban beards, were targeted and thousands were killed. They were burnt alive, purely because they had that label upon them. And unfortunately, those things happen today as well. You can look at many different parts of the world where powers to be decide, here's a group that belongs to this label, and we'll target them. So moving fast forward, this is me, and obviously you see that I don't have my turban here. So when I came back to the US, the land of my birth, my homeland, however you want to put it, I came to Los Angeles first, and most people out on the streets of LA greeted me by calling me Genie, raghead, go back home. Some people just laughed on my face. So I am a teenager, about to go to college, insecure, not having a great sense of who I am, low self-esteem, and I'm like, well, how do I fit in? How do I change myself? So the only thing I had in my control at the time is, well, I'll take my turban off, which meant a lot to me and my parents, but I didn't tell my parents. And then a few weeks later, I cut my hair off. So I told my mother first, who was across on the other side of the globe, and I had her tell the rest of my family. And it kind of worked. So people now stopped staring at me. They confused me for being Hispanic. People started coming up to me speaking in Spanish. So that's sort of another sort of impact of now new labels coming and sort of defining me. And I didn't mind those labels. And I think what would help me for a certain amount of time was now people are not seeing me as the extreme other. So it felt good. It felt good to be invisible. That was a desirable thing for me to be at that time. I don't want to stand out. I don't want people to see me. So that process actually went on for a long time, and there was something that I call a time machine that came to my rescue. And I'm not talking about a physical, electronic, mechanical time machine. I like to call books my time machine. So I fell in love with books, and believe it or not, when I was a young kid, and until I went to University of California, Santa Barbara, and then Berkeley for grad school, I had not read a single book cover to cover. I just didn't grow up in a family where books were valued. So when I went to college and I started reading books, it just opened up my horizons. I mean, I was reading history and science fiction, and it just kind of opened up my world to incredible possibilities, right? So I started experimenting with Buddhism, Taoist meditations, and eventually by ennui, with a shaved head, mohawk for a few hours, almost 10 years later, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna embrace my faith that I was born into. On my own, for the first time, nobody's telling me what to do, this is what I'm gonna try. So as part of that faith, I I started growing my hair long. And unless you've cut your hair really short and really grown it to the full length, it takes a long time to grow your hair. It took me 2 years. So for the first time in 10 years, August 2001, by this time I'm living in Westchester County, just north of New York City. And so I donned this turban, and we all know what happened a month later. 9/11 happened. So I saw the towers come down on the big screen in cafeteria at work. And within hours, I had coworkers who were giving me strange looks, bloodshot eyes, staring me down. And as the news was trickling in, I knew I'm not going to be safe. So I suddenly became that ultimate other. And within hours, I had a friend who was pulled out of a train just because he had a turban and a beard in somewhere in the American Northeast. He actually made CNN. He was on news, having been arrested because just he had a turban and a beard. So that label, being brown, but especially with a turban and beard, became the ultimate other label in America. And in some ways, it still is. So what came to my rescue is I saw a cartoon, an editorial cartoon, few weeks after 9/11. Hate crimes had risen, skyrocketing. Anybody who was perceived to be the other, Hispanic men, Muslim men, South Asians, Hindus, Christians, as long as you were brown and fitted that other label, fair game. Let's arrest you, punch you, call you names. So I saw a cartoonist who's based out of San Francisco, Mark Fury. He created a cartoon called Find the Terrorist. And he had this fast rotating image of different characters And the whole point there was, you get to click. There's a Sikh guy, there's a Hispanic man, there's a Muslim man, there's a white man, and you were getting introduced to these men. And the point was, these are all Americans, and it turns out the white man happened to be a guy whose name was John, and he had committed a hate crime against a fellow American, and he happened to be a terrorist at that moment because he was committing hate crimes, right? But we don't use that terminology for people who commit hate crimes. So for me, there were like bells that went off in my head that, hey, Mark's actually portraying Sikhs and others in cartoons, and I had never seen people who looked like me in editorial cartoons. And I said, you know what? Maybe I should start creating cartoons. So I taught myself. I started going on the internet, and I started teaching myself how to do cartooning, and really not physically drawing. That's not really the art of cartooning. It's catching contradictions in society. So this is one of the first cartoons that I created. It's an eye chart, and the plain simple message here is, we judge people all the time. We place labels all the time, right? But you don't know these people, right? And the whole point here is, look, unless you ask me what my story is, don't judge me, right? But unfortunately, we all do this. So I do cartoons based on my experiences, based on news stories. So this is really one of the coolest men who I've created many cartoons about. His name is Vishavjit Singh. He is of Indian descent. He's a British citizen now. He moved to the UK in his late 80s, lost his wife, so he spent some time with his sons there. And he fell in love with running. He became a competitive marathon runner. He started breaking world records. He did that until the age of 100 years old. He went all over the world. He still runs. He's 105 years old. He's still alive. He raises money for poor people in Africa and Asia. When he came to New York, by the way, when he was running the marathon there, he was called Osama bin Laden by some people. We all know the scream. I am, as I mentioned, a shy guy who will not, if you abuse me, if you call me names, chances are, I won't. So I'll try to maybe engage you, but if you are not interested, I won't say anything in return. But I'll go home and I'll start creating cartoons. And that's how I feel like at times. I really feel like screaming at people, but I try to pour my frustrations through cartoons. So that's how I feel like at times. Anybody here ever seen a hot air balloon with a bun on top? I bet you have not, right? But now you have. And I would say this is possible physically. This is, from an engineering perspective, this is possible. And the whole concept here is, look, have hot air balloons with buns. And I'm sure people are going to wonder, why do we have a bun on top of a hot air balloon? Well, then you get to explain. It's a Sikh hot air balloon. So anybody wants to copy this idea, it's not copyrighted. You can go ahead and make a lot of money. Just give little reference to, hey, this was an idea that Vishavjit came up with, and I bought it from there. So Googlers, take a note of that. So talking about labels, so bringing it back to real life. This man was a superintendent in New York City schools in the mid-2000s. New York City is one of the most diverse places on this planet. And believe it or not, even there today, more than half of Sikh kids who go to school report getting bullied. That's a staggering number. Half of Sikh boys and girls are bullied in schools in New York City. I can't even imagine what happens in certain other places in America. It took almost a year to convince this man, who was running our school districts at the time, that let's have a web portal so parents and kids can anonymously put complaints in so somebody can do something about it. He was not convinced. It took civil action, threats of lawsuits before he was convinced. Those are challenges, and I'm not saying he's a bad man, but those are challenges we face in society where even today, good men and women, educated, take a lot of convincing with data and persuasion, in person at times, to say, look, we need to have resources so we can share data about things that are not good for us as a society. This is another true story out of Quebec, Canada, a French and English-speaking province. Unfortunately, like many other places on this planet, diversity is something that many societies don't want to embrace, or they want to embrace it on their own terms. So Quebec, a few years ago, there was a Quebec Soccer Federation for young kids, middle schoolers. And that federation decided they're going to pass a rule. If you are a kid who has a turban on his head, you cannot play soccer. The reason was you're a danger to yourself and other kids. In reality, they wanted to pass a policy saying Muslim kids are not allowed because Quebec is having issues, quote unquote, with Muslims. But they wanted to be democratic about their racism because if they said Muslim kids are not allowed, they're opening themselves up to lawsuits. So they wanted to be, they were clever, they were crafty. Let's just make a rule for all religious artifacts and symbols. So Jewish kids, Sikh kids, Christian kids, not allowed. And this policy probably is still in place. But those are challenges. People use data and intelligence to actually figure out ways of using racism to their benefit. Another story out of a city that has been in the news last year quite a bit. What comes to mind when you think of Charlottesville? Anybody? The march. A lot of people will say KKK, white supremacy. It might be true for that period of time, but Charlottesville actually has a really unique distinction in America. It's the first city ever anywhere in America that had a Sikh mayor with a turban and beard. And most people would, if I were to say, take a guess, what city would have done that, you would imagine cities in the north. You would not think of a city in the south that would have done this. And those are stereotypes we have of places in America, saying everybody in the south is not as progressive as everybody who lives in the north. Well, you know what? It's not true. Life's more complicated. Charlottesville has this unique sort of fact about itself that it had a Sikh mayor, first turban-bearded mayor in America. So I thought that was really cool. So here's another story that did not make the news. I saw it in a blog by NAACP, which is the first civil rights organization that was representing African Americans. A Sikh man drove through Mississippi. He's a commercial truck driver, flat tire, waited for cops to come. And usually what do cops do when you have a flat tire? They come and help you. Well, cops saw him, they judged him, stereotyped him, labeled him, freaked out, physically searched him. They should not have done that, found a religious artifact on him, a kirpan, which is a religious dagger, called him a terrorist a bunch of times, arrested him. He was presented in front of a judge, and the judge said to him, "Excuse me, sir, you cannot enter this courtroom." Why? Because you have that rag on your head, and if you're going to enter my courtroom, you're going to have to leave that rag off. And ladies and gentlemen, this is somebody who has gone through law school, who's taken an oath to defend our Constitution and laws, and this is happening. These cases have happened in Michigan, in Ohio. And they still happen. They just don't make the news. Now, does it make these people racist? That's not what's important. They engaged in racist moments, and that's what's important. And we need to deal with those situations. These men need training, they need education, and unfortunately in this case, none of that happened. The Sikh man hired some lawyers, NAACP and a few other organizations, and he got those cases written off. So we have a challenge where we have a lot of intelligent people, good people, I would call them good people, even these people who need education, who need to hear stories of people who look different but share a lot in common with them. Talking about race and policing. We've had a lot of stories about black men and boys getting killed at the hands of police, right? And amazingly, if you look at a lot of surveys, even today, majority of white people have a very different perception than majority of black people. They just cannot come to an agreement that we have a race problem in America today. They'll agree we have some, but not to the extent that it's leading to police officers shooting black men and boys. So I'll share this next cartoon with you. This is in response to an NPR story where the city of Los Angeles is doing community policing. And as part of that community policing, a lawyer got access, private access to cops, not recorded, no names, nothing. Let's just have a heart-to-heart conversation, right? Nobody's going to talk about, hey, who this guy was, what your name is. And just about every police officer, white or black, said this in the privacy of these spaces, that I fear black people. I fear black men and I fear black boys. That's an incredible admission. And I'm not stunned, I'm not surprised. So imagine a police officer, one of the hardest jobs in America, you're putting your life on the line, you go out, you're trained, you're heavily armed, and you're also armed with fear. Of course, you're going to, sometimes in difficult situations, you're going to imagine a black man who's going into his pocket for getting out his ID, and you're going to think he is taking out a gun, because that's what fear does. And it is not a surprise, it's not an accident that people who look like me don't get shot. People, white men, brown men, Sikh men don't get shot by cops. Black men do. Because in many cases, including myself, we're raised with a certain fear of black people. And unless we have these conversations out in public, we will have more black men and boys who are going to get shot until we start having these conversations in public. So here's an interesting story. Joe Budden is a hip-hop artist who a couple of years ago found himself in an airport. He was at a carousel waiting for his luggage. He spotted a Sikh man who looks like my father, white beard, dapperly dressed. And Joe Budden thought, hey, you know what? I'm going to stereotype this guy. He's not American. I'm an American. So he took a photo, tweeted it with a caption saying, "Not on my watch, homeboy." He labeled him as a suspicious terrorist character. Tweeted it. People loved it. They retweeted. Thousands of times was retweeted until somebody caught on to it, brought to his notice. And this was big news for a couple of days. And so eventually he apologized. And I think he apologized after 2 days. I don't feel it was a genuine apology. He apologized because he wanted to save his brand. That's what a lot of people do. And one of the reasons I show this is stereotyping and racism is not a one-way street. It happens all over the place. I stereotype people as well. And just because you get stereotyped doesn't mean you don't stereotype other people. This is a very self-explanatory cartoon. I get asked by people all the time, where are you from? And I'm like, well, I'm kind of from all over the place. Born in DC, lived all over the place. I am from New York now. And they're like, no, but where are you really from? I'm like, well, I know what you're trying to get to. So let me just cut it short. My parents are from India. And they're like, great, you're not from here. And I mean, it's just absurd. There are Sikhs who have been here for 3-4 generations. Americans are not defined by their looks. How do you know when you look at somebody that they're American? You can't. But we do it all the time anyways. All right, so Captain America in a turban and a beard. A few years ago, I went to New York City Comic Con as an exhibitor selling my art. The first Captain America movie had come out, and I dream in turban and beards, in case you have not figured that out already. And I envisioned a Captain America who's going to fight hidden bias in a turban and beard. People loved it. They were like, wow, this is really great. A photographer in passing said, Vishavjit, why don't you come next year dressed up as Captain America? And you know what my response was? I don't think so. Because I had body image issues. I'd been bullied all my life for being skinny. So I'm like, I'm not doing this. And there was a second reason. I was getting called Osama bin Laden, Taliban, you're not from here, go back home all the time. Even now, most people stare at me. And I'm just like, and I've gotten used to it. But I'm like, why would I wear a leotard, skin-tight uniform, and walk out and have every eye that is not on me on me? So it took a year for this photographer to convince me that I should do this. So I had to prepare at home in front of the mirror. She got me a uniform from Hong Kong, a teenager size she could not find in the US. I went to Sports Authority Goods store, and I bought myself baseball and football pads, shoved them in my uniform to make myself look big. My wife had to tell me, you look like a cartoon, actual cartoon now. So if you're going to walk out, you're going to have to either be you, Vishavjit Singh, or you're not going to do this. So I did step out June 2013 as Captain America. Incredibly nervous, not knowing what people are going to think. Are they going to really be offended? Are they going to call me names? And something really weird and magical and strange happened. People embraced me as if I was a real superhero character. People hugged me. Strangers hugged me. I got pulled into weddings, believe it or not, stranger weddings. Cops came up to me and took photos with me. That never happens to me. Certainly New York City cops don't do that to anybody, not in civilian clothes. I got access to a fire department truck that was managing a parade. They gave me this truck for 20 minutes on my own. I had this truck. I pretended I was driving it. I was jumping in and out. That was my privilege for those 20 minutes in that fictional uniform where I could ask these things and they were given to me. That's the power of images. That's the power of stories, fictional stories that we take sometimes very seriously because Captain America is our superhero. It's American superhero. But guess what? Captain America does not exist, right? But you can trick our perceptual apparatus into thinking, oh, Vishavjit Singh is the coolest guy in the world. He's the coolest American. I want to share a quick story with you about this young boy. He saw me for about 10 minutes posing, and he's like, what are you doing? I said, I am Captain America for the day. He's like, no, you're not. I said, why not? And he goes, you're not white. I said, I know I'm not white, but Captain America is a fictional character. He could be a woman. He could be black, Hispanic. So he thought about it, and he goes, black, yes. Hispanic, maybe. Turban, beard, no. And he was not being malicious, by the way. He was just being honest. He couldn't fathom as a middle schooler in America. He had never seen anybody who looked like me in a superhero uniform. So I said, I'm not offended. Don't worry about it. But keep in mind, for the rest of your life, in the computer of your head, there's an image of me as Captain America, and you'll never be able to take that out of your head. So maybe next time you see somebody who looks like me, you'll think of Captain America first. So that's the power of images. So here are some labels. What you see on the left here is labels that the world has placed upon me in many shapes and forms. Some of them are benign, some are pretty offensive. Then you see that circle on the right, and you would think like, well, that's more Vishavjit Singh. That's labels I've placed upon myself. And one would think that's more of Vishavjit Singh. But I would actually make the argument that actually I'm none of these labels. I'm informed by how I've responded to these labels, how I've maneuvered, how I've managed. And we all do this every day, by the way. I'm not the only one who's doing it. I am who I am. I'm standing here today in large part because these labels on the left were placed by other people upon me, and I had to figure out a way of how do I respond to them, right? And they exposed my vulnerability. And what came to my rescue? Strangers, art, and sometimes tragedies, 9/11, surviving a genocide, feeling like I am the most unwanted man in America by fellow Americans. Those things actually became moments where I could say, you know what? Maybe I can do something new. So let me actually ask you a question. Let me move back here. Show of hands. How many of you would say you engage in stereotyping other people and cultures? Show of hands. Most hands have gone up. When I pose this question in most crowds, most hands do not go up, right? People, they don't want to acknowledge that they have stereotypes. It's a vulnerability. So let me share with you a workshop that I ran a few weeks ago. It's a private school near Boston, very diverse group. And I hosted this workshop, and we talked about our stereotypes. So these are some positive responses from young, diverse group of high schoolers. These are positive stereotypes. That can be very damaging as well. And then we moved on to negative stereotypes. This was a very long list, and this was a repetitive list, meaning many of them had these responses. And just read this list. I mean, what was amazing about these kids is not that they stand out from you, that they're racist or they have stereotyping problem. What they did is they opened their hearts in that moment, their vulnerability, and said, look, I'll honestly share this with you. This was an anonymous exercise. Each one of them responded to this question, and we read this out loud. And all of us in America, around the globe, we all have stereotypes. It's just that some of us are willing to acknowledge it, some of us are not willing to acknowledge it. And until we do that, we're going to have challenges, right? I'm presuming most of you have gone through the unconscious bias at work here at Google. Show of hands, yeah? So let me sort of say in conclusion here, it's quite obvious, labels are data points. And I know Google is really big on collecting data. But my focus is on storytelling. And one of the things that I think we lack in our approaches to diversity at times is certainly data has its importance. It's critical. We have to talk about data, right? But I think there's another very powerful factor, and that's storytelling, our stories. And what I mean by stories is we're all walking, talking stories. Each one of you is stories. You're not really defined by labels and the race labels and where you're from necessarily. You guys are stories, and those stories have ups and downs. They have sad moments, happy moments. They have strengths. They have vulnerabilities. And those vulnerabilities, typically we see them as negative things. We see them as negative data points. And I would contend those vulnerabilities are actually what define you, what make you who you are. They actually define a lot of decisions you make in your lives. Decisions where you're going to live, what you're going to do in life, where you're going to buy a house, who you're going to give your business to. Even at work, implicitly those biases come into shape and form. And many of them are implicit. You're not even aware yourself that you have those biases, right? So I would contend that if we were to really engage our vulnerabilities, there's a lot of connections you'll find. Almost everybody's here in this room and who's hearing this video, this talk, I can assure you, you sit down honestly with yourself and you can make a very long list of stereotypes that are placed upon you and you place upon other people. And we all have them. And that's what we need to start sharing. For me, I would contend stories are creative personal entrepreneurship. They have a profound potential to change our lives. And the workplace, out on the streets, our social, cultural, political future. And we all need to agree, we need to really embrace our stories and their honesty, not just as, hey, this is what I do, this is where I'm from. Really open up to our strengths and weaknesses and our vulnerabilities. And it will open up to possibilities. And it's personal entrepreneurship. And I'm using that word intentionally because entrepreneur literally means bearer of risk. And until we take those risks of being honest with ourselves, first and foremost, and then honest with our fellow co-workers, we're not going to bring about earnest change where things like black men getting shot by cops is not going to stop. So to you as a company, and especially to you as individuals, as members of broader society, I wish you an incredible amount of success in being those creative, personal entrepreneurs. Thank you. So what I'm going to do is, I fortunately also, as part of my work, have been featured in a few documentaries. One of them is known as Red, White, and Beard, which you can actually go on Google. I should say YouTube, which is Google property. Just search for Red, White, and Beard, and you will see a short 10-minute video where I actually dressed up as Captain America and walked out on streets of New York City, and I started engaging people, started asking them questions. And there's another documentary that is now doing the rounds at film festivals, Drawn Together, Comics, Diversity, and Stereotypes, that features me along with a couple of other artists who are tackling issues of diversity and stereotypes. And we are fortunate to have the director of that film, Harleen Kaur, here. So she's going to take a few minutes to introduce that project and show you a quick trailer.
Hi, everyone. My name is Harleen, and I'm a storyteller. So taking off from what Vishavjit was just talking about, I think stories are really important. Just take a moment, maybe just close your eyes for a second and think of you are in Trader Joe's and picking up bananas. And somebody is actually making monkey noises just because you're holding bananas. Or think of another situation where you're just taking a walk down the beach. You are just dressed up casually, but somebody's actually calling you a terrorist or a towelhead or a raghead for that matter. Or for that matter, let's picture this, that you just had a baby, it's a small, loving child, and you're giving all the attention to that child, but yet you want to do something different with your life. But just because you're a mom, your life is finished. Yes, these are labels. These are stereotypes. These are stereotypes that we as a society place on others. And one of the things that as a storyteller I want to do, and I wish everybody, each one of us can do in this room as well, is to shun stereotypes. It's a strange thing that, when somebody actually stereotypes us, we are like, don't do that. You know what? I was in a bad mood that day. Or, you know what? That's not who I am. You misjudged me. But when it comes to others, we really want to place labels. Oh, pregnant woman probably can't do it. Oh, this person is driving a car really badly. Definitely a lady. There's no question about it. Or, there is a child who's actually, just working around, and you're like, my God, these parents must be terrible because of the way the child is being treated. Or if there's a black man just walking around, you're like, oh, definitely a druggist. He just can't have the money to pay for what he's just, shopping around. This is something that we as a society need to change. And as storytellers, we want to show examples of people who have done it. And the story that you will probably just watch a glimpse of, the film which is called Drawn Together, Comics, Diversity, and Stereotypes, the film shows that there are 3 people who are using comics as a medium to challenge this notion of stereotypes. And sometimes we feel that if they can do it with just a pen in hand, a lot of us can do it with so many other means. So the goal is that when you watch the trailer, you go back home, read about these things, and then try and make a difference about this particular subject of people around you. make a difference in your society, make a difference in yourself. Change is what happens when you take that first step.
Comics are a great way to comment on stuff that's happening in the world.
Creating cartoons allowed me to channel my anger with how I was being perceived, have been perceived all my life. You're not American.
As a woman creator, the idea that maybe my stories would naturally be romance stories or soap opera type stories. In reality, I like big adventure stories with action and explosions and super big, fun, crazy stuff.
What I wanted to do was make a commentary on race without making a commentary on race.
There's a lot of people who have had hardships before Six came here. Get out of your comfort zone, which means do things that haven't been done by your community before.
Collectively, if we are all allowed to do what I do, which is make stories from my perspective, showing that I am more than what is depicted in mainstream media, then we can really have a decent discussion about solving the problems and issues of race and stereotypes.